Phil Savage, welcome back to Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well.
I'm good, Ryan. Hope you're doing well. Thank you.
No doubt. And certainly we want to spend a lot of time as I know it's a busy week for you guys leading up to the Senior Bowl, and some great lives will be changed next week with a lot of performances there at the Senior Bowl.
Well, we certainly hope so. You know, we've got 110 players coming in, and the thing that I love about our game is that every player, regardless of what school he comes from, has a story to tell. And hopefully the experience here in the 3 days of practice and the meetings and the interviews and then the game on Saturday, the 28th of January, will ultimately be part of their story. And there's been some unbelievable players come through over the years, from Joe Namath and Leroy Jordan back in the day to Ozzie Newsome and Tony Nathan and guys in the 70s from Alabama all the way through to this year with Ryan Anderson and Dalvin Tomlinson. Cole Mazza is going to be there, and, of course, O.J. Howard as well.
I know it's in the name, Senior Bowl, but with so many juniors departing early, and certainly you guys are in demand when you want to see All-Stars go up against All-Stars and see how they evaluate against the best of the best. Have you guys looked at adding juniors to the Senior Bowl?
Well, we do have an exemption for underclassmen. We can take graduates, specifically those that finish in December ahead of our game, even if they have remaining years of eligibility. We were able to get that done about 4 games ago, and DJ Fluker was actually the first one to take advantage of that opening as an early graduate that was headed to the NFL. So it's important to us to maintain the integrity of it being an all-star game, and that means what they've done in many respects on and off the field. I have to say that if it was ever open to just any junior with no restriction, I don't think it would be good for our game, because I think it would put our organization between the players and their respective schools. I can foresee a circumstance where, a player goes to his coach and says, hey, if I go out, they say I've got an invite to the Senior Bowl, and we may not even have said that, but an agent could say that, and that could be an enticement for a player to leave school early. We want as many players as possible to stay in. We think it's important to go back and get that 4th or 5th year of development before they go to the pros. So from my standpoint, I wouldn't particularly be all that excited about opening the doors to all the juniors.
Let me talk about the guys that are from the University of Alabama that's headed down there. Ryan Anderson, O.J. Howard, Cole Mazza, and Dalvin Tomlinson. Out of those guys, which has the most to prove and could increase their stock next week?
I think all of them can help themselves. I would start with Ryan Anderson. I know during the season, Ryan, sometimes during the halftime when we take a break from the broadcast, I'll see friends of mine that are player personnel people from the NFL, and if I had it said to me once, it happened 4 or 5 times where scouts would tell me, hey, there's star power on this Alabama defense with Jonathan Allen and Reuben Foster, make no mistake about it. But the guy that's really playing well is Ryan Anderson. And I think with Ryan being here, of course, he's from this area, from Daphne. He can play over the tight end as an outside backer. He can drop off into coverage. He had a knack for making plays this year. He can rush the passer. And I think that one of the real debates, quite frankly, for NFL scouts is going to be, okay, do we take the legit pass rusher in Tim Williams, who's a bit of a one-trick pony, versus a Ryan Anderson who can do a lot of different things? And I think he can prove that next week in playing for the Browns staff. The next guy I would say probably is O.J. Howard. I think O.J. right now is the number 1 tight end in this class, particularly with the injury to Jake Butt, the tight end from Michigan that got hurt, unfortunately, in his bowl game against Florida State. But to me, O.J. is going to have a chance to really flourish next week in our game. ultimately at the combine, the pro day. I think everything's pointed up for OJ to definitely be a first-round pick and be the selection for somebody that's really looking for a multifaceted tight end.
We are going, as we look at the conversation with O.J. Howard, do scouts take into consideration when you look at production, he was probably a little bit underutilized this year due to a growth of a freshman quarterback. Do a lot of those guys in NFL teams, do they take that into consideration and go, okay, we know what kind of player you can be. We understand there were some growing pains there with throwing the football at Alabama this year.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is taken under consideration. I think when most people watched Alabama play this year, two thoughts came to mind. Number one, they've got a true freshman quarterback. They're only really comfortable throwing the ball quickly into the edges of the field if they're going to try to throw it downfield. So the middle part of the field, despite the fact that O.J. Howard could be a threat down the seam, was really not utilized as much unless Bama was down in the red zone. Of course, we saw Jalen Hurts throw a couple of strikes to OJ in that part of the field. So I think it absolutely is taken in and under consideration. The one thing about the Alabama program under Nick Saban is the fact that they're open 365 days a year. So it's no secret that O.J. Howard has size. He's got athleticism. He can catch the ball. He works hard in practice. And so, all those things are going to translate well for him.
Is that, when you mentioned that, and that's something that we talk about here at Alabama, when scouts are able to come to practice and to be able to see these players go up against high-level guys, even sometimes better in practice than they do on Saturday afternoon, how much of a value is that? And does that not happen a lot around other college programs?
Well, it's a huge value, and I would say because of the attitude that Nick Saban has towards the NFL and professional football, he understands that scouts are there to do a job, and to do their job, that means they need to be able to evaluate the players. And with that said, I think Coach Saban's philosophy is that, hey, we want them here as much as possible to not just evaluate the Jonathan Allens of the world, but to look at guys that are, potential late-round draft picks or even free agents so that they get an opportunity to go to the NFL. But he's had a huge influence in the SEC. There were a number of years ago where a lot of the schools were restricted to Monday only or restricted to just certain parts of the practice, almost like the media, where they have to leave after a few minutes of the opening warm-ups and all. So most of the schools that have been impacted, particularly when it's been a Nick Saban disciple like a Jim McElwain or Jimbo Fisher or Will Muschamp, those schools are all wide open. There's other programs, though, in this part of the country and other sections of American college football where there are definitely restrictions in terms of when the scouts can go in. Some schools are only open one week out of the month. Some schools are only open, during the month of October during the season. So it's a huge factor in terms of allowing the NFL to come in there and really do their homework on these players.
Phil, you're a guy that really I love to hear you break down talent, and I enjoy hearing your perspective, the way that you spot talent, the way that you identify. I'm just curious where you see CJ1 Hurts needing to improve the most as a passer going forward.
Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts has got a ton of talent. I think that was clearly obvious from the first time I really saw him, which was last spring, and then in the A-Day game to what he showed in August, and then throughout the season. I think in my estimation, one of the disappointments for him at the end of the year was the fact that typically some of the younger players really improve over the month of December because of the amount of practices that they have. And in this case, it was ahead of the playoff game against Washington. Unfortunately, we did not see that translate to the game action in terms of the UW contest or the national championship game against Clemson. But I think he's got a lot of room to grow. I think the potential is there for him to really become a better overall quarterback. There's no denying the fact that he's a true dual threat. He's built like a running back, but he's got a good arm. I think that ultimately the biggest improvement for him, Ryan, is going to be, training his eyes and really understanding where to go with the football, especially after the first option is taken away. And that is not exclusive to Jalen Hurts. That's pretty much indicative of most every young quarterback. But I think that is an area where he can really improve. And I think he'll do that once Bama's coaches are able to really get their hands on him this spring for an extended period of time.
We're talking right now to the executive director also for the Reese's Senior Bowl there in Mobile, the Senior Bowl coming up next week, and we'll have tons of coverage as we'll cover that transition from the college to the NFL game. He's also a color analyst. You've been a part of Nick Saban as far as a relationship with him going back to your coaching days. I'm just curious. We had Bruce Matthews on a couple of days ago, and we were talking about Nick Saban there in Houston with him as an assistant coach, and he described that same business-like mentality. You've known Nick Saban for, 20, 25 years, maybe more? Am I putting too many numbers on there? But I'm just curious how much change you see from the Nick Saban of old and the Nick Saban of where he is today.
I would say the Nick Saban on the practice field is almost exactly the same that he was in 1991. Now, he's improved like everyone does, and I think he's definitely, tried to do that. But the drills that a lot of the defensive backs that they use today and will this spring in 2016 are the same ones that he had in place back in 1991 when we were on the staff at the Cleveland Browns together under Bill Belichick. I think where Nick Saban has really grown has been in terms of just becoming the complete head coach. It's the way he has a plan for academics, strength and conditioning, recruiting, player discipline, the media. I mean, this is something that he worked on, learned through trial and error at different schools, and obviously Michigan State and then LSU before he went down to the Dolphins. And I think he's been able to apply all of that to the University of Alabama. I think Alabama was extremely fortunate to get a coach with his kind of pedigree and resume and experience in terms of being able to walk into that job and handle everything that comes with it, because it is a huge task to be the head coach at Alabama, and to think that he's not only the CEO of the program, but actually has a hands-on approach in terms of actually coaching the team. I think that's probably the thing that I respect the most about him, because that is very difficult to achieve what he's done, and especially when you consider the success that the Tide has had, particularly over the last 8 years, but really even over the last 10.
Nick Saban's always a 10 out of 10 when we talk about energy, focus. But how much will that last play and losing that championship game re-energize, take it up a notch for Nick Saban this upcoming year, if it's even possible to do for Nick Saban? He's always, like I said, a 10 out of 10 on just about every category. But how much will that loss burn that desire and maybe even rekindle some fire?
Well, I think the important question is how much will it inspire and motivate the rest of the team, the players and the coaches and the staff members there. It was a tragic ending to a dominant season, and it hurts. There's no two ways about it. But at the same time, I don't think Coach Saban will approach what he's doing right now in terms of recruiting, what their plans are for spring practice, any differently than if Clemson had missed the pass and been, shanked a short field goal and Alabama would have survived and won, or maybe even survived and ultimately won the game in overtime. But regardless of those things, that's the beauty of the program that he's put together there, is that win, lose, or draw, there's always something to be done later today, tonight, tomorrow, next week, 4 months from now, and all of it leads to the performance on game day and ultimately the results that they've enjoyed there. So On one hand, I think it would be, certainly motivating, I guess, to a degree, but I don't know that for him that's really what makes him tick. I think maybe for the players it will be, and that's really the most important thing, because those are the guys that have to go out there and perform.
Reese's Senior Bowl coming up on January the 28th. That's 1 week from this coming Saturday. Free Reese's Cups for everybody. Is that right? No, I made that part up. I mean, listen, I'm a huge Reese's Cup guy. I mean, is it free to all the media, right? I mean, at least the media, right? If we make it. I think
last year Hershey informed us after the game week that they distributed over 25,000 Reese's Pieces and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups over the course of the week. So there's certainly enough to go around for everybody.